Part 49. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 484. Radios continue to broadcast news, now gradually replacing newspapers. In Ennet, the Ministry of Construction announced that the Yonjai Palace, the world's largest underground palace, has finally been completed. This is a miracle in the history of engineering. It lasted 10 years and 6 months. This huge underground palace will become the greatest pride in the architectural history of the Ennite people. Eternal Night Palace, a sneer appeared on Garen's face. King Ennet was a madman pursuing power. The Eternal Night Palace he built was actually a huge totem magic array, with the purpose of converting his own the physical body and Ennite's most powerful sleeping colossus merge into one, pursuing the greatest power ever. That's a lunatic who wants to become a god, but he hasn't shown it yet. While listening to the news, Garen took a shower, ate some fruit, then sat cross-legged and undressed on the bed, and began his routine secret martial arts practice. Daily practice is the basic step to integrate the nine-headed dragon. For the next 10 days or so, Garen did not wander around, but stayed in his room, claiming to be digesting and absorbing the seed of the ancestor god, but actually waiting for the time for the evil god's origin to be traded. The Black Sky Society has become more and more low-key recently. Ever since the battle with the master of the Star King Palace that day, the entire Black Sky Society seemed to have completely disappeared. There was no movement, including intercontinental news, international news, and domestic news from various countries. Any news comes out. The annual Ancestral God Seed event is over, and a large number of totem masters from various countries have begun to leave. The land of the ancestor gods gradually became more and more deserted. This was originally the important land of Shanya, and Pharaohs has always been here, living on the largest ancestral tree. Now that there is no ancestral god seed, totem masters from all over the world have no reason to stay here. In the past few days, the two palace masters of the Star King Palace also left in a hurry. I don't know if they were injured in the fight with Shenyun or for some other reason. The three major agencies have always been on bad terms with each other. By the time Garen learned of their departure, they had already been gone for 2 days. The sixth princess of Shania came to visit Garen from time to time, and she was obviously very interested in Garen. Finally, just before the people from the evil god cult were about to leave, the news Garen had been waiting for finally came. Sigula sent someone to notify him and prepare for the transaction. The time was 3 o'clock in the morning, and the place was inside the Ennet embassy. At 2 o'clock in the morning, in the darkness, Garen suddenly opened his eyes, lifted the quilt from the bed and sat up. I looked at the small clock on the bedside table. The fluorescent green pointer on it pointed at 2:30. It was dark in the tree hole, and only the round window had a subtle green light coming in through the curtains. Garen got off the bed and put on a black pleated skirt. The structure of this pleated skirt is very simple. It is a rectangular piece of cloth with a round hole cut in the middle for a person's head to fit into. Then a silver belt is tied around the waist, and 2 pieces of cloth are placed on the front and back of the person's body. With the waist cinched in the middle and hidden zippers on both sides, it becomes the simplest and most beautiful skirt that can be worn by both men and women. It's just that this pleated skirt has no sleeves, which is the only flaw. This piece of clothing was the one the servants here brought to me to replace it after the clothes on Garen's body collapsed last time when he caught the evil god king's blow. Bring a material belt bag. Although Garen is not a totem master who relies on spells to fight, the belt bag sometimes contains many material objects that are indispensable in order to cope with various environmental conditions. There are healing potions, recovery potions, detoxification potions, etc. placed inside. Of course, the most important thing is the shining water that is ready to be exchanged. Wearing a large black cloak over the pleated skirt, Garen began to try to completely control his aura and totem light. It wasn't until he couldn't feel any of his own fluctuating aura that he opened the door and walked out of the tree hole. Outside the tree hole, Two maids who were dozing off moved slightly, as if they were about to wake up. Garin took out the general powder from his waist bag and sprinkled it. The two tilted their heads and fell asleep leaning against the door frame again. This is a traceless sleeping powder. It acts as a hypnotic when used in small amounts, and becomes a powerful hypnotic when used in excess. It also evaporates quickly and is difficult to detect. It was also a preparation item sent by Sigula. Garin glanced at the lightless cave next to him, and there could be faint and even breathing sounds of 4 people inside. Needless to say, this guy hooked up with a few more Shanian girls last night. Garin was speechless, tightened his cloak, took out a black mask from his arms and put it on, tucking all his blonde hair into the cloak without leaving any trace. Then they walked out along the tree hole where the two lived. There are more than a dozen tree holes in a row next to each other. There is no life in the other tree holes. It is obvious that no one is using them. Garin easily left the tree hole area and came to the vine road. There are also 3 men in black cloaks standing at the flight point. One of them wears black gold dot patterned gloves on his hands, which is a feature that Sigula has pointed out in advance. Seeing Garin coming out, Sigula stepped forward to greet him. "It's just you." His voice was hoarse and low, completely different from his normal voice. It was obvious that he had changed his voice through some means. "I thought I was early," Garin added, his voice turning into a slightly hoarse female voice. He is proficient in secret martial arts and body structure, but he once lived with the King of Nightmares for a period of time. Such a simple method of changing his voice is easy to do. Sigula and the others were also slightly startled, as if they did not expect Garin to be so capable of changing his voice. If it weren't for the fact that this very unique cloak was the one given to Garin, Sigula would have doubted whether it was someone else. "Now that we're all here, let's go," he reacted quickly and looked at the black cloak on the right. The man nodded, took out a black ball, and threw it into the air. Silently, a huge black bubble suddenly appeared in mid-air, 6 meters in diameter. Black bubble slowly floated down and landed in front of the 4 people. Sigula was the first to stand in, followed by Garin, and the other 2 were last. The black bubbles immediately took off and floated slowly towards the black night sky. The surface reflects a little starlight, almost blending in with the dark night sky, indistinguishable from each other. Bubble left the ancestral god tree and gradually flew towards the east of the land of the ancestral god. About 10 minutes passed, and soon, several identical figures in black cloaks could be seen standing vaguely in a forest below. Black bubble landed firmly on the right side of the group of people. The bubbles dispersed, and the 4 Sigula people came out. "I thought you wouldn't come this time," an old man's voice came out from among the dark shadows. He faced Sakura, apparently speaking to him. "How is it possible? Last time it was just an experiment, but this time it's serious." Sigula shook his head. "I just got some inventory. I originally wanted to save more and replace it, but I ran out of time." "I'm the same as you." The shadow man nodded and stopped talking. Apparently, like Sigula, they were led by one person and a group of people, and came together to exchange things with the evil god cult. The 2 groups totaled more than 10 people. Garin looked around. Not far away, in the woods and grass, there was a faint circle of black wooden stakes, and fine black particles seemed to flash on the wooden stakes. Magical runes. After a while, 2 black bubbles sank in the sky again, and more than 10 black cloaks came out of the bubbles. "It's time to start," Sigula said. Of course, a clear female voice answered in the black cloak that had just come down. A black cloak stood up and walked to the front. "According to the old rules, first complete the agreement we exchanged last time," the woman said lightly. The black cloak blocked all detection methods, making it impossible to see clearly whether he was a man or a woman and what his strength was. As the words fell, the black cloaks on everyone's bodies shone slightly, and there seemed to be silver light flowing on the surface. Silver numbers quickly appeared on the chest of the cloak. From the 1st to the 28th. Garen looked at his number, it was number 11. The surrounding black wooden piles suddenly fell silent, emitting a layer of grey powder mist, gradually wrapping it up, forming an upside-down hemisphere. The sky gradually became grey. Apparently it was completely obscured by the black wooden piles. Now let the transaction begin. I'll go first, the woman's voice in the black cloak spoke again. Her number was number 1. This time it's my turn to be number 1. The thing I took out is a blood jade pillar, which is about 500 years old. What I want to exchange is the fountain of ites, 1 unit, or more. The quality cannot be lower than that of white light. She turned her right hand, and a small and exquisite red jade stick suddenly appeared in her black gloved hand. It looked like an ordinary jade stick, nothing surprising. I brought the fountain of ites, but if you want to exchange your blood jade pillar for a unit with white light quality or above, it is still missing. Among the group of people on the left of Garen and others, a black man stood out. Cloak number 16 said directly. Likewise, he took out a clear crystal cup in his hand, which contained a thick white liquid that was steaming white. Then add 5 more evolution stones. Ken. A transaction was completed quickly, and after both parties inspected the goods, they happily exchanged things. Garen watched with cold eyes. Obviously this is a small trade fair, not just an exchange of evil god origins. The so-called evolution stone is an evolution crystal, which is obviously a kind of hard currency. Then the second person steps up and completes the transaction agreed upon last time. There are 2 main ways of trading. One is this peer-to-peer exchange. Even if it's not available now, make an appointment to come back a year later. The other is to exchange requests. Use treasures in exchange for a strong shot. Just now, someone used a weird dagger that could suck blood to grow, in exchange for a powerful master's promise to take action. Garen also discovered that the robes of 5 people present were different from the others. Himself, Sigula, 2 of the people on the left, and then number 1 who was the first to stand up from the opposite side. The cloaks of the 5 of them are darker and purer than the others. This is obviously a sign of strength. People stood up one by one, some exchanged treasures and resources, and some exchanged promises. The credibility of this kind of transaction itself is extremely low. When the person who promises to take action gets the thing, it is up to him whether he takes action or not. But generally strong people will not break their trust in order to gain credibility in long-term transactions. Otherwise, no one will come to him again for this kind of costless business next time. As for the party paying the treasure, they can only pray that they are lucky enough. After all, being able to hire a strong man of this level to take action is simply unimaginable in the world of ordinary people. This level is simply not comparable to that of the War Guild Killer Guild. Soon, the transaction came to an end, and among the people on the opposite side, number 1, who was the first to speak, finally stood up again. Okay, now it's time for the main event. The origin of the evil god I agreed to last time has been brought. Anyone who needs to redeem it can come forward now. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 485. As soon as he finished speaking, the other 4 men in dark black cloaks, including Garen, all stood up. In addition, including the Willow Valley Master and the others, there were 4 ordinary people in black robes. 8 people in total. Number 1 nodded. That's it, the others can leave. It was very quiet. Everyone else released black bubbles one after another, flew away from here, passed through the grey bowl-shaped shield, and quickly disappeared into the night sky. After number 1 waited for everyone to leave, he turned around and led everyone out of the grey shield and walked deeper into the woods. The group of 9 people walked through the forest for several minutes. Soon, a small white manor appeared in front of them. There are high walls outside the manor, and a stone pillar stands beside the white iron gate with the words "Enite Embassy" engraved on it. Number 1 led everyone to the gate. The gate opened automatically with a creak, and there was no one inside. The entire manor seemed unusually quiet. The group of people walked into the manor, and the door automatically closed behind them. On the second floor, in a spacious study-like room, number 1 finally stopped. A circle of seats, more than 10 in total, had been arranged in the room, and everyone took their seats. Sigula and Garen were next to each other, and the rest of them sat around the other two strong men in dark black cloaks. Number 1 sat in the middle. "Can we start now?" the old man leading the team on the other side asked impatiently. He knew Sigula and was one of the 5 strongest people. Next to him sat an ordinary black robe. "The old man's number is 7. "Yes, we don't have as much time as you," another strong man sitting on his left nodded. "His number was number 2. Number 1 smiled softly. "You can start anytime." He pointed to the ground with one hand. The floor among the people suddenly made a whining sound, and a translucent crystal pillar rose from the ground. The middle of the crystal column is completely transparent, and there is a cavity inside, where a wriggling ball of yellow soil is floating. This ball of soil is only the size of a fist, orange in color, with a big black eye in the center, blinking from time to time. The origin of the Earth God is a standard unit, which can be exchanged if needed, number 1 said calmly. "I want it," strongman number 2 said directly. He raised his hand and a small light blue bottle came out. At the same time, he grabbed it from a distance and directly took the origin of the Earth God out of the crystal pillar, then disappeared into his sleeve with a swish. Number 1 was not worried, nodded, caught the small blue bottle, opened the lid and looked inside, then put it away silently. Next, after the crystal pillar fell, it quickly rose again. It was once again filled with a ball of light black mist airflow, forming a small tornado shape inside. The small black tornado whirred and rotated, and the entire room you can hear the faint whistling of the wind. "The origin of the wind god," number 1 said calmly. "This is what I decided last time," Sigula said. Also throwing out a small black bottle with one hand, he stepped forward and carefully transferred the small tornado in the crystal column to a black funnel. "I don't know what method was used, but I just touched the crystal pillar lightly, and everything was completed instantly." After Sigula put away his things, he came back and sat down again, looking a little satisfied. "I don't need to ask for anything else." "It's up to you," he whispered to Garen and the others. Garen nodded, and the other two just smiled. Next, the inferior and lower level evil gods were still replaced one by 4 people in ordinary black cloaks. The 4 masters of Willow Valley were weaker. After they were replaced, they immediately said goodbye and left without stopping. Soon, only the 5 strongest people were left in the room. Garen watched coldly. The shining water on his body was not enough to exchange for the intermediate source, but it was still possible for the lower level. One lower level source requires 10 copies of shining water, and he can produce 30 copies of shining water. In other words, he can exchange for 3 copies of the lower level source. As for which 3 parts need to be carefully considered, they must be consistent with his nature. A portion of the origin was taken out. It was obviously a portion separated by each evil god at a time. Each of the 19 evil gods, including the evil god king, took out a portion. Of course, no one at the intermediate level could redeem it. Only the shining pool. How long will it take to be out? No one can save 50 copies of sparkling water. There are a few remaining copies below, which are all lower level origins. It depends on whether you need them or not, number 1 said calmly. Your intermediate and superior origins are asking for such a high price. I'm afraid you simply don't want to exchange them for outsiders, right? The number 2 strongman said coldly. How is that possible? If you don't want to exchange it, there's no need to take it out, right? Number 1 replied with a smile. Okay, let's talk about which origins are below. Hey, if this thing hadn't been separated from the evil god religion headquarters, I would have killed a few evil gods to extract it. There is no need to waste time here. Old man number 7 said impatiently. Number 1 was not angry. He just pointed with one hand and the crystal pillar on the ground rose again. This time, it contained several copies of the evil god's origin in different colors. Red, white, black, and purple, 4 different origins form a small square in the cavity, each occupying a corner. Red flames, white ice, black blood, purple sand. The die-hard origins show different magical scenes respectively. Here are the 4 origins of the god of fire, the god of ice, the god of war, and the god of time. Among them, the origins of the god of war and the god of time are inferior, and the other 2 are inferior. You can see which one you need. Number 1 said calmly. God of time, Garen was a little surprised. He didn't expect that there would be someone among the evil gods who dared to use such a powerful title. You must know that the attribute of time is not something that all totem masters can touch. He's just an evil god with the ability to retrace time. His title sounds like he's very strong, but he's actually not that good. Sigila called from the side. I've dealt with him before, and his strength ranks 3rd among the lower level evil gods, barely okay. He's a cunning guy. The upper level is the evil god king, and the intermediate level is the water god, the light god, and the thunder god. The inferior ones are the god of wind, god of war, god of time, etc. As for the last 10 ranked evil gods, they are all inferior. I want the god of fire. I want the god of war. The voices sounded one after another. I want the god of war and the god of time. Garen's voice seemed to conflict with the voice. He paused for a moment, then looked along the sound, and the person he was competing with was number 2. Number 2 hesitated for a moment and then looked over. If you want it, then I'll forget it. He actually gave up directly. I have already obtained 2 copies of the origin just now. Let's give them to number 11 this time. Garen was ready to argue with him, but he didn't expect the other party to give up immediately, so he nodded to him to express his gratitude. Both were lower level origins, totaling 20 points of shining water. Garen wrapped the small bottles of shining water together and threw the small package directly to number 1. At the same time, he stepped forward and put the 2 evil god origins one by one into the prepared crystal ball container. He only used these 2 sources for research. You will never absorb it without knowing how to use it. Moreover, the healing effect of shining water is also very powerful. He must keep part of it for his own use and cannot exchange all of it. The 2 origins that were absorbed into the crystal ball, one black and one purple, formed 2 areas of light of different sizes in the ball. The 2 forces were faintly confronting each other. The black halo was obviously stronger and occupied most of the area. Carefully putting away the origin crystal ball, Garen sat back down. This transaction was completely concluded after the others had completed the transaction and then made an appointment with the source of the evil god that would be needed next time. Garen and Sigila used special props to release black bubbles, sat in them and circled around in the woods for a long time, and finally returned to the flying point of the ancestral god tree where Garen was. The night gradually became lighter. The black bubble slowly fell to the flying point, and Sigila took out a black ring from his arms. This is a simple tool for us to communicate in the future. It is a single channel mode. It can only contact about 10 people in a small amount. If you have any good things in the future, you can contact us. Of course, if we have any good information, we can't get it by ourselves. I will also ask you for help. It will be beneficial for us to make progress together. Let's make progress together. Garen also smiled, took the ring, and put it on directly. Although he had to check it when he got back, he naturally couldn't do such a disgraceful thing in front of the other party. An additional channel, whether it is intelligence or recruiting the main force, is a very useful help at critical moments. The other party obviously also valued the powerful strength of Kurosawa Palace and Daisetsu Mountain behind him. and Sakura obviously represents Enet's power. Naturally, it will not be just him. The only people who own this kind of ring are my Enet's 2 Type 5s. Sigulo mentioned it briefly, which immediately made Garen understand, and he valued this ring even more. At the same time, it was also pointed out that the Red Leaf Tower Master and Willow Valley Master who were together before should not be eligible to get the ring. Thank you. The two of them separated at the flight point and watched the black bubbles flying up into the night sky until they completely disappeared. Garen then turned around and walked towards his tree hole. There was silence in the tree hole, and Garen patted the small green fruit beside the door. With a snap, the ceiling above the entire tree hole suddenly lit up with a layer of faint green light, like a lighting lamp, completely illuminating the entire tree hole. Garen looked around and found nothing unusual, then took off his black cloak, revealing the clothes underneath. He walked to the middle of the tree hole room, raised his left hand, and pressed it slightly in the air. Call. A black poisonous mist centered on his body and instantly spread out in all directions, soon filling every inch of the room. The poisonous mist filled the air for several minutes, until some small bugs in the corner of the tree hole were completely corroded into puddles of pus, and then slowly recovered into Garen's body. He glanced around the room with satisfaction, and blood-red Maiwa Chi flowed out from under his feet again. Soon the entire tree hole room was completely covered and filled. After making sure that he had the courage to completely cover the tree hole, Garen picked up the radio on the table, turned it on gently, and then started to adjust the radio channel according to the numbers in his memory. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 486. This radio was still in the royal capital of Kuwaitan. It was a gift given to him by those little guys, and he still uses it to this day. Soon, the radio was tuned to the channel mentioned by the previous Thor, Hanet. It was empty inside, except for the rustling sound of signal interference. Galen picked up the radio and removed the sound filter. Hanet. Are you there? He said into the radio. There was no answer. Time passed by, and just when Galen thought that he had entered it wrong, or that Hanet had lied to him, a small voice finally came out from the rustling sound on the radio. Are you my brother's friend? A timid girl's voice came from the radio. That's right, are you his sister? Garen asked. Yeah. My brother is out. He told me that if someone comes looking for him, tell him that it may take some time to meet, the girl said intermittently. Garen frowned. He was not sure when the Hell Gate of Black Sky Society would be released. Time was his biggest trouble now. Then can you tell me where your brother went? He tried to make his voice sound gentle and easy. I don't know either, the girl replied quietly. There have been more and more people in the evil god cult recently. That Odu injured my brother and uncle last time, and now he's here again. Garen recalled that he had never heard of an evil god named Aodu in the evil god religion. Is Odu very powerful? He asked quietly. Well, it's very powerful. My uncle almost died at his hands last time, the girl replied with a worried voice. Who is the uncle? Galen had no idea that there were two unknown people beside Hanet. The girl didn't seem to be wary of her brother's friend's status, and she quickly told all the details step by step under Garen's questioning. Compared with the scenery before reincarnation, Hanet is now almost at the end of his rope. The so-called Odu is the lackey of the evil god cult who has been responsible for hunting down the three of them. He is the #1 general under Thor. The strength is at the spiritual level, and every time it drives the three of them to desperation, almost to the edge of collapse. The three people now, under the persecution of the evil cult, have ruined their families. In this life, Hanet can only run for his life with his only blood sister and family uncle. There were constant injuries, big and small, along the way. If it is a martial arts story, maybe this can be regarded as training again and again. Maybe the mind will become more mellow and firm. A genius with amazing talent can feed the battle with battle, become stronger and stronger, and finally lay the foundation for something. Unfortunately, this is the world of totem masters. Totems require a lot of resources to maintain, not to mention the resources required for evolution. Every totem master is an expert at burning money. Even the original Goth was able to embark on the path of evolution because the black domain bird had basically no effect and had minimal losses, as well as the care of his father and the planning of his mother. Hanat is very lucky that the core totem has not degraded under such consumption. As for evolution, without material resources, it is estimated that it is unlikely to evolve in a lifetime. After chatting with the little girl for a while and figuring out Hanat's situation, Garen heard that the little girl was slightly tired and out of breath, and then he took the initiative to stop chatting. After turning off the radio, he temporarily gave up the intention of filtering it with Hanat, and instead took out the crystal ball again. The crystal ball containing the origin of the evil god looks extremely beautiful. Black blood and purple sand are slowly floating and rotating in it. If you look carefully in the black blood, you can see traces of dark red blood lines. There is faint golden sand mixed in the purple gauze. It's better to do your own research first. Garen made up his mind and unscrewed the upper lid of the crystal ball. A small half of the crystal ball was uncovered, revealing the origin of the evil god rotating inside. He first chose the more powerful god of war origin. After raising the alertness of the surrounding spirit, guard against possible threats, and then carefully use the black water true skill to keep it in its most active state. Then he stretched out his index finger and lightly touched the black blood. The fingertips were suddenly stained with a little black blood. Putting the lid back on, Garen looked carefully at the black blood stain on his finger, with the red bloodline swimming like a leech on it, as if it were a living thing. No totem light fluctuations can be felt above, just like a little bit of ordinary blood. Ah! Suddenly, a scream rushed into Garen's mind. A red bloodline suddenly rushed out, like a sharp thorn, piercing Garen's right eye. The scream brought a moment of sluggishness, but in that instant, Garen instantly deflected the black blood and retreated sharply. Boom! There was a violent earthquake all around, and in the unknown darkness in the distance, a pair of dark blood pupils slowly opened. After crossing an unknown distance, the two of them looked at each other at the moment when the bloodline was about to hit Garen's eyeball. Black water, Garen roared wildly, and the black water power all over his body suddenly accelerated his luck. The right hand turned into a black lightning, wrapped in countless black water, and with a snap, it almost teleported, and accurately clamped the bloodline. The tip of the bloodline suddenly broke, and the sharp thorns continued to stab toward the eyeball. Clang! Garen flicked his nails and followed closely, breaking the spikes and completely flying them away. Bang bang bang! Garen took several steps back, leaving deep and clear footprints on the floor. Finally, his legs sank into the floor, and he stabilized in place and finally stopped moving. He held the bloodline between his fingers, his chest heaved vigorously, and beads of sweat formed on his forehead. At this moment, the flash barrier didn't even have time to activate. At the moment when the bloodline sneak attack, he suddenly stopped relying on his instinctive reaction. If it weren't for the terrifying precision of the control of the King of the Century, his body would probably not be able to react at all. A strong person at the Type 5 level might not be able to react to such a sneak attack. Those eyes. That aura of the evil God King. Garen shook his finger, and the bloodline suddenly disintegrated and turned into red light spots and disappeared. Apart from this peak master, what other means could bypass his totem light? It almost cost him galleons to react. At this moment, Gia vaguely felt that his state of mind was a little unstable. The change in this moment was too fast and too thrilling. That bloodline gave Garen as much danger as a direct blow from the evil God King. Sit down cross-legged and quickly begin to regulate your breathing and body condition. But at this time, the 9-headed dragon head that had been fused took the opportunity to start struggling. Before complete integration, the totem itself still has biological instinctive resistance. Puff. Garen couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. His face suddenly became a little ugly. Although he had already been mentally prepared, there should be something fishy in the origin of the evil god. But I didn't expect it to be such a direct and violent method. It's so dangerous. I didn't expect that just the origin of the ordinary evil god would actually hide the evil god king's methods. His face was as white as a sheet of paper, and a large amount of energy and blood were used to suppress the restless dragon head. A trace of hatred flashed in the eyes of evil god King Garen. Whoosh! Garen's figure disappeared instantly, and the two evil gods' origins also completely disappeared. The window of the tree hole room was silently broken into a big hole. A black shadow shot through the sky like a bat. A night embassy. Garen's figure instantly appeared in front of the gate. Boom! With one punch from one hand, the door immediately fell apart, exploding inward and causing countless fragments to fly. Who are you? Several guards and a totem master on duty looked nervously. Garen strode forward and stepped into the door. Ignoring the shouts of the people around him, he looked up at the second floor of the embassy. At the window there, a surprised young woman's face also looked down. Garen opened his arms wide, and countless black water vapor surged out from his body. Countless black clouds turned into several dragon necks wrapped around Garen's right arm. Buzz! There was a sudden thunder on the ground, and Garen's figure turned into a black lightning and punched the woman on the second floor. Ho ho ho! Countless 9-headed dragons roared one after another, roaring and roaring at the same time. 5 black dragons wrapped around their right arms, like a black air column, crashing into the entire second floor of the embassy. In the night sky, between the sea of black and green trees, a black cloud suddenly exploded and filled the air. In the huge black clouds, 5 black dragons were circling and flying, destroying everything in sight. The deafening roar of the dragon echoed in the night sky. The entire embassy turned into countless debris and rubble in the black clouds, and a bloody light rose into the sky. Garen! You're crazy, the sharp female voice could be heard in most of the ancestral god land. There was another huge dragon roar, and the 5 black dragons merged to form the largest dragon's mouth, and they suddenly looked up to the sky. He actually bit the red light and swallowed it directly. Almost destroyed my foundation. You evil god sect is seeking death. Garen's voice, mixed with the dragon's roar, sounded loudly. From the beginning, his intention to exchange for the origin of the evil god has been grasped by the evil god cult, and he deliberately tampered with the origin of the god of war or all the origins. Since the evil god cult didn't even need the last fig leaf and completely broke up with them, he had nothing to worry about. If you want me to die, I will kill you first. The black clouds dissipated, and Garen grabbed no one's head with one hand. His 5 fingers were like dragon's teeth, and he bit deeply into the thorns like no one's head, scratching out 5 deep holes in the entire beautiful face. Brain fluid mixed with blood overflowed from the edge of the hole. If he hadn't been well prepared and vigilant when checking the source, he would have been successfully attacked this time. It would be extremely difficult for him to enter the 5-type fusion stage in the future. He was just a little short of being shaken out of the fusion state, and all his efforts were almost in vain. All the fusion dragon heads almost broke free from his blood control. He didn't want to experience this feeling again. Below the land of the ancestral god, the densely packed tree holes on the ancestral god trees lit up one after another. The green and yellow lights only lasted a short while before they were all lit up. Soon several powerful auras flew through the air. Garen glanced at it coldly, and quickly disappeared into the night sky with the body in hand. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 487. Forcibly breaking through the forbidden air power of the ancestral god tree, Garen quickly searched the woman's body several times and found another unredeemed evil god's origin on her body. At a glance, it turned out to be the light god's origin that was briefly introduced before. Putting it away in his pocket, the red dragon shadow flashed on Garen's face, and the corpse in his hand was swallowed whole by the nine-headed dragon, leaving no trace. Most of the anger caused by the sneak attack just now was vented. He breathed out hard, and his heart suddenly tightened. He had been attacked by a sneak attack just now, and his heart was furious. A wave of evil fire suddenly rushed up. Under the violent murderous intention and bloody impulse of the nine-headed dragon, he actually went directly to the evil god cult to kill people. We have the origin of the evil god, we can't stay here for long. Garen was about to turn the contact ring on his hand to contact Wu Guang, but he didn't expect that a dark cloud suddenly appeared in front of him, and a familiar wave of totem light suddenly appeared in front of him. No light. It's me, a male voice came from the dark clouds. What happened? It's too late to explain now. Let's leave here quickly. I killed an important person in the evil god religion and robbed some things. I will never let it go. Galen said a few words in a hurry. Go back and give it to His Majesty Pharaohs to listen to the radio. Just send a message and we'll leave right away. Without saying much, Wu Guan carried the carriage they came from among the dark clouds, with a female guard sitting on it. The three of them didn't say much. The large black clouds and Garen's black water true skill cooperated and flew quickly to the outskirts of the land of the ancestral god. Let's split up. You go back at full speed. I'll do something else and be back soon, Garen whispered. He was floating in the dark clouds, with no one around him, but he knew that Wu Guang would definitely be able to hear him when he spoke like this. Arrive. Okay, I'll take people back first. If necessary, you can contact them through the communication ring at any time. Wu Guang also knew that in the face of the high-end force of the evil god religion, he was just a drag now. 3 days later. On the outskirts of the land of the ancestral god of Shanya, there are villages of different sizes. In a newly built cabin, gloomy and dim light came in from the window, and the faint morning light dyed a small area of the cabin white and gray. Cough, cough, cough. In the hut, a short boy with white hair was covering his mouth and coughing, his face pale. Are you okay? A middle-aged man's voice came from the bed in the cabin. It's okay. He's not dead yet. The young man put down his hand and hid the scarlet dots on his palm behind his back. In the end, I was punched in the back by Odu, and I was slightly injured. It's not a big deal. I have already given her the medicine you found inside. The situation should start to improve now. It's a pity that we are trapped here instead, the middle-aged man said helplessly. It doesn't matter, there will always be a way. The white-haired boy was clearly Hanat, who had just left the land of the ancestral gods. He was hunted down by the people of the evil god cult and almost died several times before he hid in this village with great difficulty. Get some rest and respite for now. Xian and the others are almost here. With their help, it will be much easier, the middle-aged man said softly, looking at the pale Hanat. How could he not know that Hanat's current situation is almost there? We are at the end of our rope and driven to a dead end. After being injured one after another, all the maintenance totem resources and materials in his hand were used up, and his strength dropped to the freezing point again compared to before. Originally he only had the strength of type 2, but now he has fallen to type 1. If it weren't for the support of the winged god's arm, Hanat might have fallen to the evil cult's pursuit long ago. Seeing the trace of hatred flashing in Hanat's eyes, perhaps what supported him was the unforgettable hatred for the evil god cult. His parents died tragically, and his family members were brutally dismembered and devoured. The evil cult and Hanat's hatred has reached a point where they will never end. They are them, and I am me, Hanat replied indifferently. Don't put your hopes in the hands of others. This is a stupid idea. But at least Stone Eye has also advanced to the 4th type, which is considered to be far more powerful than us. Isn't it? Hanat remained silent and said no more. Woo! A huge white wolf more than 10 meters high looked up to the sky and howled. A large stream of golden threads was sprayed out from its huge mouth, which spread out and flew in all directions like raindrops. These golden threads were like living creatures, moving quickly through the surrounding green woods, searching for traces of any target. Ding! There was a crisp sound, and several threads were cut off. A golden shadow flashed out of thin air, running away from the white wolf at high speed. Run! Hurry! Hurry! Baker Sheehan was in a state of embarrassment. The robe behind his butt was torn, revealing his white buttocks. His body was covered with light golden sticky fluid, and even on some of his exposed skin, it was also stained with this light gold slurry. Under him is a huge golden flower, a huge flower like a sunflower. There are dark green tentacles of tree roots growing under the flowers, like many short legs, running so fast that they almost turn into a wheel. The 11th Princess Tina also sat on the giant flower. This little guy was hugging Sheehan's thigh tightly, with snot and tears on his face. He didn't have the elegance of the princess at all. The whole back half of his body was floating backwards because he was moving too fast. Levitate. This is the residual pressure of the strongest totem king Sirius from 3,000 years ago. The place just now has the ability to excavate the strongest residual mark in history. As long as we escape from the 2,000 kilometers range, we should be fine, Tina roared loudly. He didn't dare to wipe his nose, so he could only rub it hard on Sheehan's robe. The situation of the two of them was extremely embarrassing. Damn it, a totem that lasted for 3,000 years is still so strong now, are you lying to me? Baker Stone Eyes couldn't help but curse. Anyone who was hunted for 3 days and 3 nights, without even giving time to go to the bathroom, would probably be scolded even if he was mentally retarded. You still say that? I told you not to touch that thing, but you insist on touching it. If it weren't for you, we would have arrived in Shanya, Tina screamed. SHH. Some white water splashes flew out of Tina's lower body. Drifted behind with the wind. The corner of Sheehan's mouth twitched a few times. This was how the two of them had been here these past few days, and they had long been used to peeing their pants. As for wet pants, they will dry up if they are blown by the wind. I want to die. Tina's face was full of shame and anger. Although it wasn't the first time she peed her pants, it still made her feel embarrassed and angry every time. Just let go, Baker said blankly with stone eyes. Suddenly, a huge black shadow enveloped the two people. Hurry! Go to the right! They both screamed at the same time. Boom! It was like a high explosive bomb exploding instantly. A large area of trees was smashed, and a deep black pit appeared on the ground. The giant white wolf raised its right paw, and golden threads continued to come out of its mouth. These golden threads emitted like smoke, constantly blocking the two people's hiding space in the woods. Along the way, with Baker Stone Eyes' powerful strength, he didn't have to worry too much about safety issues. Unfortunately, without having to worry about safety, his greatest curiosity as a researcher was completely activated by the strange changes in the scenery along the way. Relying on her Type 4 strength to explore everywhere, Tina's warnings were a bit intimidating at first, but later on, she just hit whatever she was warned about. After a few consecutive incidents, I became more and more courageous. Until he provoked this extremely fierce white wolf. This white wolf's body can instantly transform between illusion and reality. It is extremely powerful and can dodge any attack. The speed is astonishing and the lethality is extremely powerful. He chased the two men for 3 days and 3 nights without giving up. Soon, the National Boundary Monument of Sunia was faintly visible in front. The two of them rushed behind the boundary monument, and suddenly a huge wave of anger rushed towards them. The huge white wolf behind him roared unwillingly and finally retreated slowly. Bang! The two of them sat down on the ground in an extremely embarrassed state, lying on their backs, barely wanting to move a finger. Just breathing in the fresh air. Baker's stone-eyed hair was blown into a broom shape by the wind and stood up high. 2 dents were blown out on both sides of Tina's face, and the 2 pieces of fat on her chin were slightly drooped, like a pug that couldn't recover. "So happy," Tina moaned, "I really want to lie like this forever. Let's wait until we find the gathering place of humans. At least we have finally arrived in Shania." Baker's stone eyes stood up with difficulty, feeling that his crotch was empty and a cool breeze passed between his legs. He turned around. All the packages were lost on the way to being chased. He didn't even have a pocket bag, only a few rings on his fingers were still there. Exhaling heavily, he picked up Tina. The golden flowers were panting from exhaustion on one side. The sunflower-like golden flower disc was tilted to one side, and the body was hunched up and down, as if it was panting violently for air. "Is it okay, Sunflower?" Sheehan patted Sunflower. Sunflower nodded quickly, and a large group of tentacle roots below hammered the ground to show that she still had strength. "Then it all depends on you," Baker said helplessly. Pulling Tina onto the Sunflower again, she quickly headed towards the land of the ancestral god of Xania. Garen was sitting cross-legged alone in a forest. The air around him was filled with a faint black mist, and the trees and grass showed signs of withering. The area where he was sitting cross-legged was dozens of kilometers away from the land of the ancestral gods. This is a forest sea in an extremely remote location, mostly surrounded by bamboo forests. Between the green bamboo sea, a small black circular halo area is like a small ink stain on the green cloth, extremely clear. That's the rest area where Garen is. It has been 3 days since he left the land of the ancestral gods alone. The fusion of the 5th dragon head has been successfully completed. With the help of the 2 seeds of the ancestral gods, the fusion he successfully completed also started the fusion of the 6th dragon head. Leaving the land of the ancestral god was not a decision he made arbitrarily. Although this will directly face the pursuit of the evil sect, it will also hide his whereabouts, turning from light to darkness. In this way, if the Ghost Gate of Haitian society comes out and takes action against the land of ancestral gods, it will not affect him for the time being. With the larger and clearer evil god cult and the king of Shania, there was no way they would hunt down and deal with external forces like him first. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 488. He remembered clearly that the first place he went to after leaving the Ghost Gate was the land of the ancestor gods. Now that he has obtained the origin of the evil god, his goal has been achieved, and there is no use in staying here any longer. The next step is to find Hanet's previous Thor and filter the evil god king's wool. Otherwise, there is no way to use the source even if it is in hand. As the king of the century, once Garen is promoted to the 5th type, his combat power can instantly reach the peak level among the 5 types. That is, the same level as the evil god King Pharaoh's. His use and practice of secret martial arts has reached a mellow and transparent level, unlike the other 5 types who practice secret martial arts from scratch. This is his advantage. But the key is that Kyuzuryu has insufficient potential. At the realm level, he can only reach the lower level of Type 5, which is the first stage of Type 5. There is no possibility of moving forward. This is the upper limit determined by Kyuzuryu's genes, and there is no way to change it. No matter how strong the combat power is, it can be compared to the peak of Type 5, but it is only far beyond the effects of other people's secret martial arts realm. After the Ghost Gate was broken through, the Speaker of the Council of Elders was the pinnacle of the veteran Type 5, and he also died in his hands. And still won without any injuries. In the original history, no one could stop the Black Sky Society. It was not until the later stages of the war that the 3 heroes gradually rose up and used the power of an ancient magic circle to bring everyone's power together, which seriously injured the Ghost Gate. Then Baker's Stone Eye's sneak attack killed the most powerful totem master in history. But this battle also caused the entire totem world to lose all its high-end combat power, and a large number of inheritances were lost from generation to generation. The totem civilization suddenly fell to its lowest point. On the contrary, the technological civilization showed signs of rising, and gradually developed and expanded in the confrontation with monsters. In any case, you must first enter the fifth type to be qualified to occupy your position in the chess game of Dongzhou. Otherwise, once the ghost gate is born, Garen understood in his heart. Bang! Suddenly there was a muffled sound in the distance, as if something exploded. Nowadays, the population of Dongzhou has dropped sharply, and the monsters are gradually gathering together under the control of the master of the lair. The environment is much peaceful than before. But those who dare to walk in the wild can only be powerful totem masters. Or a chaotic monster that doesn't obey orders. Garen quietly put away the defensive poisonous mist and began to move his position again. Soon he found a ditch again, sat down close to the mountain wall, and once again entered the state of operating the true black water skill. Unexpectedly, this time another muffled sound came from the distance. Among the messy footsteps, it was obvious that someone was approaching quickly. Garen frowned. Once it could be said to be a coincidence, but twice in a row, the other party came towards him with great accuracy, so it was obviously not a coincidence. He is now fully using the Black Water True skill, coupled with the Troll Grip and the increase in fighting skills, it can only be equivalent to the middle level of Type 5, and it is only barely reached. Once he encounters a true Type 5 mid-level player, he will definitely run away. The two indirect fights with the evil God King made him clearly understand that although his full strength attack was equivalent to the mid-level of Type 5, now was the critical period for merging the Dragon Head, and he could not be affected by turbulence, whether it was emotional or physical injuries. Last time, he was almost attacked by the evil God King Yeoken, causing all his previous efforts to be wasted. So his actual performance is even lower than the middle. I left the secret of the evil god's origin to His Majesty Pharaohs and Sigula. Now they should be busy causing trouble for the evil god cult. How can they still have the energy to search for me everywhere? Garen was confused. Without any hesitation, he changed places again. This time it's a little further. But soon, within 10 minutes, the muffled sound was approaching again. At this moment, Garen knew that the other party obviously had some way to track him. He simply stayed put and waited for the other party to get closer, to investigate and see who they were. As dense footsteps approached quickly. In the distance of the bamboo sea, more than a dozen masked men and women in red tights were carrying a small ornately decorated single seat. Sitting on the red seat was a dark-haired man wearing a red dress. Garen was slightly stunned, and looked carefully again. Yes, it was indeed a man wearing a red dress. The other person was wearing pink lipstick and eyeshadow. He was holding a white feather fan and his eyes were blinking. It would be fine if this person was a beautiful woman with a male and female appearance, but he still has a faint trace of stubble on his chin, and his face is a standard Chinese character face. He is obviously a majestic and sturdy man with a strong body, but he still makes a charming gesture of ogling. Garen only felt a little acid reflux in his stomach, and he suddenly thought of one of the 18 evil gods of the evil god cult. The description fits the current appearance of this person very well. The god of flowers should be him. Garen looked over from a distance, and the other party had obviously seen him, fanning himself from a distance and ogling him. Garen's expression remained unchanged, he suppressed the discomfort in his heart and waited for the other party's arrival. Except for the flower god, there are no other noteworthy masters in this team. The flower god himself is only ranked as an inferior evil god, that is, at the 4th level, ranking low. Coming here alone, there might be some changes. It didn't take long for Flower God and his party to arrive in front of Garen, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground. The single seat was slowly put down. Flora twisted her waist and stood up from the seat, standing on the green grass. Her eyes looked at Galen, who ignored him with interest. Others say that the nine-headed demon dragon Garen is so cruel and terrifying. He will show no mercy to his enemies and can kill even the most beautiful women. Now it seems that they don't understand love. Garen's eyelids twitched, and his intuition told him that if he allowed this person to continue talking, the situation would twist in some strange direction. "You, goddess of flowers, came here to see me. What do you want?" he said directly. "What's the matter?" The flower god covered her mouth with a white fan and burst into a sweet smile. "As one of the evil gods, it took me so long to find you. What else can you do? Do you think you have the strength to defeat me?" Garen laughed disdainfully. "You didn't kill me right away. Could it be that you were fascinated by my beauty?" The flower god took out a small mirror and looked at his face with a narcissistic look on his face. "I'm so handsome, and I'm embarrassed to say this," Garen couldn't help but said angrily. As soon as the words came out of his mouth, he felt something was wrong. Normally, he wouldn't be able to say that. Thinking back to the previous impulsive killing, Garen had some guesses. The influence of Kyusurio's nature finally began to affect his subconscious. He has not forgotten that this kind of overlord-level creature itself is extremely narcissistic. Since this kind of influence is not obvious, he has not paid much attention to it. He did not expect that this kind of influence is actually subtle. As soon as the words came out of his mouth, Garen knew it was bad. "Open your eyes and look." Sure enough, the flower god's little mouth opened slightly, looking at him with a surprised and confident expression. "I thought that no one else in the world could achieve this level of appreciation and fascination for myself except me. I didn't expect that I would meet you now." He seemed a little excited, his cheeks were red, and his eyes were full of love. Staring at himself. "No wonder we hit it off right away. Now it seems that only beauties like us are the most perfect couple in the world." The hairs on Garen's body stood on end as he suppressed the nausea in his heart. "I don't think we are suitable. Don't blame me for being rude if you don't leave." He had no interest in taking action against such an opponent. Even getting closer is a little disgusting. After saying that, he immediately stamped his feet, floated back lightly, and flew out wrapped in the corrosive poisonous mist. The flower goddess stood there without moving, but his face showed excitement. "You can't run away. We are the only ones in the world who are the most suitable." Before he finished speaking, the lingering sound of the word was still echoing in the bamboo forest. The red dress on the flower goddess suddenly flew up and turned into a dancing red cloud. Hiss! The red cloud fell and actually moved to the front of Galen instantly, turning into a red umbrella. As the red umbrella turned, white flowers rained down from the sky. A charming and enchanting white jade face was revealed under the umbrella. It is actually a woman's face that is so perfect that it is indescribable. The same red dress, the same posture, the same eyes, and the same totem light. It was the flower god just now. Sacred flower. "Capture the king." The flower god suddenly pointed his finger, and stabbed straight towards Garen with his slender white jade-like fingers. The surrounding space seemed to be spinning, the bamboo forest gradually disappeared, and the surrounding area turned into countless arcs of green light, blurry, and nothing could be seen clearly. "You dare to take action even if you are a small type 4, Garen's face turned cold, and he faced the flower goddess with one hand. Clang! The two people's fingers intertwined, and there was a sound of gold and iron clashing. The totem lights intertwined and collided, sputtering out a large number of tiny points of light. Red dots and black dots surrounded the two of them like elves' raindrops, forcing all the dull-faced servants brought by the flower god back. Easily suppressing the opponent's thorny finger, Garen grabbed it with his right hand and was about to tear off the flower goddess' head with one claw. Suddenly I saw a trace of pity on the extremely perfect face of the flower goddess. My heart involuntarily froze slightly, and there was actually a hint of regret and love. The attack in his hand slowed for a moment, and the flower god took the opportunity to jump backwards and leave. As the red umbrella rotated, his figure was enchanting, and waves of fragrance filled the surroundings. Together with the vitality of the surrounding green bamboo forest, it gave people an extremely beautiful illusion. As expected, Master Garen is indeed a tough-talking person with a gentle heart. The flower god smiled sweetly. You're thinking too much. Garen's face was slightly cold. He suppressed the strange feeling in his heart and stretched out his right palm. Countless black water vapor suddenly gathered in his palm, quickly forming a ball of black water. The water ball rolled and turned in the palm of my hand, with the shadow of a black dragon faintly swimming inside. With a crash, the water ball suddenly dispersed and turned into a vortex of water vapor. Garen's right hand suddenly plunged into the center of the vortex. Tear. Behind the flower god, a black vortex emerged out of thin air, and a big white hand suddenly appeared in the center. The fingers were as sharp as knives, and the nails were as red as a dragon's mouth. Bite the flower god hard on the back of the head. Ah! The goddess of flowers gave a sweet cry, and fell softly to the ground. As if by coincidence, a large piece of the red dress was torn apart by her claws, revealing her fragrant shoulders as white as jade. Garen's heart skipped a beat, and a feeling of dryness suddenly came over him. Even closing his eyes quickly had no effect at all. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 489. What kind of ability is this? Garen hurriedly took more than 10 steps back. When he stood firm on his feet, a layer of sweat appeared on his forehead. He felt as if a small hand was constantly disturbing his extremely stable mental state. What do you think? The flower god smiled coquettishly, and Garen was shocked again. Okay. The evil god king has such a plan. Garen turned around decisively, jumped a few times, and quickly disappeared into the bamboo forest under the cover of the black poisonous mist. The goddess of flowers lay still on the spot, his eyes moving, as if he was thinking about something. Aha! A black shadow flashed across the sky over the bamboo forest in an instant, and the black wind blew through. Large bamboo leaves were torn off, and the bamboo poles in the bamboo forest were pulled crookedly. The black wind fell to the ground, and the figure inside was immediately revealed. Garen's expression remained unchanged, but there was a trace of fear in his eyes. No wonder Flower God dared to track me alone. The feeling I had just now was actually a spiritual power. He thought about it carefully and realized that it was indeed a spiritual power. If this ability was normal, it would have no impact, but in this special period, his mind cannot withstand any fluctuations. Once it is shaken by the influence of supernatural powers, it is not social to ordinary people, but his fusion will be in vain. The evil god king must have noticed this, so he sent the flower god to pursue him independently. There must be other evil gods being restrained. Otherwise, it won't just be an evil god chasing after him. After Garen realized this, he left decisively. The flower god's spiritual power had no lethality, but at this special time, it could kill people. In addition, the evil god king gave him some secret means. In this case, it would be foolish to go head-on. As for reputation, Garen will naturally not be burdened by false fame, and will do what he needs to do. Take out the water bottle in your fanny pack and take a sip of water. If I were on my deathbed in the last world, I might have fought head-on because of my pride. But now a trace of nostalgia flashed in Garen's eyes. When he thought of the previous world, he thought of his sister Ying-Er, Andrilla, the Nightmare King and others. And Xianflan, who eventually fell into the lava. Lord Garen. Suddenly, a coquettish moaning female voice came from the distance. The voice sounded like a complaint, as if the abandoned beauty was begging her lover to change her mind. Sir, please don't run down Xiahua, okay? Puff. Water almost spurted out of his mouth. Garen was originally affected by the spiritual power and slowed down a little, but the last word "little flower" left him completely speechless and shocked. Maybe people in this world don't have any bad associations with it, but having traveled from the earth, he was deeply impressed by Xiahua's vulgar name. This time, the impact of mental powers has been greatly reduced. Garen's eyes suddenly became clear, and he looked back to the depths of the bamboo forest, as if he saw the flower goddess running towards here through the bamboo forest. Without hesitation, he continued to open the black clouds and flew towards the distance. The two of them chased and escaped, but Garen faintly started to circle around in circles with the flower god. He vaguely noticed that his fusion state was becoming more and more stable after being shaken by the flower god's power again and again. It is becoming increasingly difficult to fluctuate. Realizing this benefit, he simply took the flower god and ran around in the bamboo sea, stopping from time to time to wait for him. The goddess of flowers seemed to have noticed that the power was not very effective, so he simply kept silent and chased Garen. But once Garen stopped, he didn't take the initiative to approach him. He just stared at him from a distance, and sometimes his sad eyes could be seen through the gaps in the bamboo forest. A full 5 days passed like this. On the 6th day, Garen took the flower god around as usual. Suddenly a red line shot out from the bamboo forest behind. The red thread was like a spike. When it flew in front of Garen, it suddenly slowed down and turned into a thread. It flew around Garen gently before falling to the ground in front of him. Garen didn't know where this came from. The flower god's aura was still 2 kilometers away. He frowned and picked it up. The red line was a bit thick, and there was a small note wrapped in it. Tear the thread and take out the paper. A line of words is clearly written on the white paper. Woodhouse number 12, Ankon village, Honnet. Garen looked around and found no trace of human figures or totems. He is worthy of being the previous generation of Thor and the god of Forbidden God. But his concealment skills are already extraordinary. He knew that the person who conveyed the message was either Honnet himself or his relatives and friends. With such concealment ability, it's no wonder that the evil god cult couldn't completely catch him for so long. Lord Garen, the female voice of the flower goddess, came from behind again. This time, Garen was sitting cross-legged on the ground, quietly waiting for the other party's arrival. Soon the red shadow flashed, and the flower goddess descended from the sky lightly, still holding the red umbrella in her hand and wearing a tight red dress, which showed off her perfect concave and convex figure. Her skin is as white as snow, and her face is as beautiful as a flower. If the first impression of the tall man with the Chinese character's face wasn't too impressive, Garen would probably have thought that she was a truly unparalleled beauty. But it's a pity that he has figured out the details of Flower God in these few days. This guy himself is a cross-dressing man, but his totem is the manifestation of this peerless beauty. He relies on the supernatural talent he has had since childhood to merge himself and the totem into one in advance. The two merged into one and completely fused before reaching the 5th type. What brought him was not great power, but his current weird state. She usually looks like a strong man, but once she uses the ability of the totem, she will become a peerless beauty. The flower goddess herself constantly transitioned between extreme low self-esteem and extreme narcissism, and finally formed such a weird and neurotic personality. You finally stopped running, Flora looked resentful. Can't my company make you happy for so many days? Garen's mouth twitched. The goddess of flowers always likes to be so ambiguous when speaking. Unfortunately, every time he thinks about the cross-dressing fetish of the Chinese-faced woman he first saw, his heart suddenly turns from clear to dark clouds. This has become his biggest reliance on immunity to mental powers. Did the evil god king ask you to bring me something? Garen calmed down and spoke calmly. The flower god was startled, as if he didn't realize Garen's jumping ability. If not, then you can die. The words have not yet finished. Laugh. A white palm suddenly appeared in front of the flower god. The 5 fingers on the palm are blood red and claw-shaped, like a mouth-opening dragon head. Roar. Ruiauruau's dragon roars were layered upon layers. At this moment, Garen used all his strength to activate the Black Water True skill, and the combined power of the 5-headed dragon burst out with all its strength, without any mercy, and grabbed directly towards the eyes of the flower god. Not to mention the peak of Type 4, even if you encounter Type 5, you won't dare to fight head-on. These days, Garen relies on the goddess of flowers' superpowers to continuously reduce the possibility of being shocked during his fusion period. Now I have been able to exert my full strength head-on. The flower god screamed, and his whole body suddenly turned into countless pink petals, narrowly escaping from death under the sharp claws. The petals quickly regrouped somewhere in the bamboo forest in the distance, and when they were about to gather together, a black light flashed. Garen's figure suddenly stood beside the petals, his eyes calm, and he slowly retracted his hand. The palm of his right hand pierced the center of the petals, and the violent sea-like black water power stimulated the new power after the fusion. Using the shock technique, a large number of petals were scattered directly in just an instant. A large number of petals flew towards the rest of the place again, trying to gather into a human form again, but the black light flashed again, and the petals that had just gathered, half of them were once again dispersed by Galen. Being in the elemental state and unable to recover his body, the flower god was a little panicked. His ability was a bit weird. Wherever there were petals, he could teleport directly. However, it also took time to converge into a human form. The elemental state could not teleport over long distances. Moving can only be done within a small range, and unfortunately, Galleon's speed is equivalent to teleporting within a small range. Time and time again, the petals tried to construct a human form, but they were shattered by Galen. Each time they were shattered, the gathered strength would become weaker. Being in the elemental state consumes a huge amount of totem light every minute and every second, and the flower god becomes more and more panicked. Bang! Garen smashed the pink petals with a punch, and a large number of broken petals flew everywhere. Different from the previous 10 times, this time, Flora could not get up again. Completely transformed into elemental petals, gradually disappearing into place. It's a pity that the evil god is immortal and his origin is not bad, so there is no way to completely kill the opponent. Garen shook his head regretfully. He spent a lot of time honing himself with the flower god's spiritual powers. Now that the body's condition has stabilized, not surprisingly, the progress of merging the dragon head is getting faster and faster. Obviously, this kind of training also has a promoting effect on the integration itself. With the 5 dragon heads, most of Garen's strength has been transferred to the Black Water True skill, and the strong power of the combination of totem light and blood and energy has gradually emerged in his body. With a flash barrier and full support, Type 5 would not be able to penetrate the defense and injure Garen. However, the flower god's ability obviously bypassed this point and directly affected the spirit, which made Garen take the initiative to retreat at the beginning. Lord Garen is so charming even when he kills people. He is indeed the man I like. The flower god's voice floated through the air as thin as a gnat. I will come to you again. Galen felt goosebumps and rushed directly towards the village in his memory. Long before coming to Shanya, he had memorized all the maps around the land of the ancestral gods, and found this village without any effort. Engihan village. A remote village outside the land of the ancestral gods. There were not many villagers inside. The village chief was presided over by an evil cultist, and he would teach young children at the evil cultist every Sunday. Hanet's disguised identity was that of a fighting instructor for these children. He is a retired Shennian soldier and has some good fighting skills. The entire village is a simple village built of white wood, surrounded by spiked fences, and surrounded by cattle and sheep raised by the villagers. These mutant cows and sheep are fat, and they lower their heads from time to time to eat the mutated grass. Knight, go teach the children again. Knight, you look a little bad lately. Do you want to go to Lin La's place and have a look? Uncle Knight, do you still have the hand-knitted sacks like last time? Hanat came back from church, and the surrounding villagers greeted him warmly along the way. He was dressed in brown linen clothes, with a warm and soft smile on his face, and a black leather hat on his head, completely covering his hair. All the way back to your cabin. In the room, the middle-aged man was squatting in front of a small wooden basin, whittling something in the wood with a knife. Hearing him come in, the middle-aged man turned back and glanced. Shi Yan and the others have already found Ailin. They are leading her here. They are new faces and should be able to find a chance to get close to the ancestral divine pillar. It's not that simple. Hanat sat on the ground opposite the man. Neither King Shanya nor the evil god cult will allow me to absorb the power of the ancestral god pillar. If what happened last time was not an accident, I probably would not be able to leave the land of the ancestral god. If we want to deal with the god of thunder and the evil god cult, maybe we can find other help. The middle-aged man's eyes flashed. I just went to find the master from Kuwaitan. Hanat's pupils shrank. You're crazy. That guy is murderous, cruel, if he turns against you. If you want to deal with the evil cult and regain the power that Havana stole, we can't do it alone, the middle-aged man said calmly and lowly. And in the land of the ancestral gods, he helped you once, so he should have some intentions. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 490. Is he another person who wants the winged god's arm? A hint of gloom flashed across Hanat's face, and his hands clenched into fists involuntarily. The nine-headed demon dragon Garen, the master of Kurosawa Palace, is one of the four giants of Kuwaitan. He is powerful and cruel. In pursuit of power, his family even does not hesitate to conduct experiments on human beings. This matter is considered by almost everyone in Kuwaitan. Everyone knows that in order to consolidate his power, Garen himself once massacred thousands of people in one day, and the blood flowed into rivers. No one in the entire imperial capital wanted to offend this madman, the middle-aged man explained. The evil god cult has offended such a vicious person should give them a headache. In this way, the pressure on our heads will be reduced a lot. This Garen is also a dangerous person, very powerful, and our cooperation with him is also full of dangers. Hanat recalled what happened that day in the land of the ancestral gods, and quickly positioned Garen at an extremely dangerous level. It doesn't matter. Nine-headed dragon is only the peak of type 4. Stone Eyes and the others are coming over. We also have a type 4 master who can completely contain Garen. We cooperate with each other and each get what we need. The middle-aged man seemed to take everything into account. Arranged. This time, I found out a big secret of the evil god cult. Oh. Most of their masters have recently gathered back. On the surface, they are fighting against the Zania royal family. In fact, they have discovered a brand new ancient ruins. This ruins even has a certain connection with the origin of the evil god king. Looking at Hanat's slightly narrowed eyes, the middle-aged man said seriously, what I mean is that while the evil god cult is focusing on the ruins, we can tell the Royal Alliance about this news. When the two sides fight, we can take the opportunity to enter the land of the ancestor gods and inherit the power of the ancestor gods. Firoz is always guarding the ancestral pillar. This plan is unlikely to succeed, right? Of course. Who? The middle-aged man suddenly realized that something was wrong with his voice. The two of them jumped up suddenly. One of them had a blue arc of electricity on his body, and the other was covered with red magic runes, as if he was covered with red bumps. The two of them were shocked to find that an extra figure appeared in the closed room. The man sat cross-legged next to the two of them, looking like he was listening carefully. Hanat's hair stood on end. The man in front of him was more dangerous than the current god of thunder, Havana, who had taken away his power. This kind of unprecedented creepy feeling has never been felt even in the land of the ancestors. What they were most proud of was their concealment ability, but they didn't expect that someone would sneak in without even realizing it. The figure sat cross-legged on the ground, wearing simple gray linen clothes, with tassel-like blonde hair flowing smoothly around the shoulders. On his handsome and fair face, there were 3 vermilion marks between his eyebrows. When Hanat saw the 3 vermilion marks, he vaguely guessed the identity of the person. The majestic lord of Kurosawa Palace, Garen, never thought that he would imitate those sneaky people and sneak into other people's homes. Those are just false names. The other party smiled, and his handsome face actually gave people a dangerous and bright dazzling feeling. As long as I want to, I'll do it. Overemphasis on certain things will make life very tiring. Hanat felt like they were facing a formidable enemy. When they were in the land of the ancestral god, he didn't know who this young man was or what his identity was. However, after his uncle's reminder, Hanat realized how dangerous the man in front of him was. Being able to kill thousands of people without changing his expression, such a strong man must be a hegemon even if he is not a tyrant. Although Hanat saw the evil god king's attack in the air being blocked by Garen, he did not experience it personally and had no idea how powerful Garen was. It wasn't until now that a needle-like killing intent slowly emitted from the other side that he realized that his previous evaluation of this person was still too low. I wonder what the master of Galan Palace would do if he found me, a down-and-out boy like me. Hanat calmed down. The various hardships he had experienced and the awakened memories of his previous life allowed him to quickly stabilize his mind. Looking at Hanat and the other two, Garen's narrow eyes narrowed slightly. I said, "Little guy, have you forgotten our original agreement? You gave me this address." "It's me," the middle-aged man suddenly said from the side. His forehead was already covered with cold sweat. Under the influence of Garen's vigor, his whole legs were trembling, and he felt faintly unable to support himself. "That's the address I sent you." The middle-aged man took courage. "Your Excellency Garen, we all have a common enemy, the evil god section. The so-called enemy of our enemy is our friend." The sound stopped suddenly. The middle-aged man just saw Garen glance at him, and suddenly he felt like he was in a dream, and a strong feeling of fear suddenly surged up in his heart. His legs fell to his knees. His eyes were glassy, his body was covered in sweat, and he could no longer speak. Unlike Hanat, he is only a Type 1 totem master, and his core totem only has one ability, and that is hiding. Under the pressure of Garen's courage, his courage was gone in an instant, and his whole body was almost on the verge of collapse. Garen snorted coldly. A little ant actually wanted to be on an equal footing with him. A giant dragon never associates with garbage that is not even as good as food. The ratio of cooperation efforts between the two parties is not at the same level at all. Only Hanat, who was the previous generation of Thor and had a special physique, could catch his eye. "Uncle," a trace of shock and anger flashed in Hanat's eyes. "Don't worry, I just want him to be quiet for a while," Garen said nonchalantly. This experienced old guy is obviously much harder to fool than the one-minded previous generation Thor in front of him, so it would be better to let him calm down first. "What on earth do you want to do?" Hanat stood there, not daring to move. Only when he faced the other party's oppression directly did he feel how terrifying this person was. The surrounding air seemed to be squeezing itself with infinite pressure, and the blood in his body seemed to be boiling, flowing faster and faster, and getting hotter and hotter. He was extremely courageous and kept standing, facing Garen directly. Garen finally smiled. "What I want to do is very simple." He turned over one hand, and a fist-sized crystal ball suddenly appeared in his palm. The ball was crystal clear and extremely beautiful. This sphere alone could probably be sold on the market for a sky-high price of tens of thousands of gold wool cloths. But Hanat's sight was attracted by the ball inside the ball. The origin of the evil god, he couldn't help but uttered in surprise. "Oh? You really know him?" Garen's lips curved with a trace of satisfaction. "The true body of the god of thunder is a taboo body and a purifying body. Now you know what I want you to do for me," Right. Hanet's face turned pale. You are crazy. To purify the origin of the evil god, you must completely defeat the will of the evil god king. No one can do it. No one. He suddenly recalled in his mind the miserable situation in his previous life when he was forced by the evil god king and finally had no choice but to escape death. That bloody figure is simply an invincible nightmare. Even now, he still occasionally dreams about that terrifying figure, that kind of overwhelming pressure that is almost suffocating. Just do it. The smile in Garen's eyes disappeared instantly. A huge, sticky, terrifying pressure instantly spread out, pressing hard on Hanet. Kaka. Hanet braced his knees desperately to prevent himself from falling to the ground. Under the pressure of the two forces, the bones of the knee made a faint cracking sound. I saved your life back then. As a human being with basic integrity, shouldn't you repay me well? Garen was still smiling, but his eyes were extremely cold, giving people a contradictory and terrifying sense of gap. Hanet's sweat was like a stream, flowing exaggeratedly from his temples, pooling at his chin, and dripping to the ground. Remember, the origin of this evil god will be left to you. How much time do you need to prepare? 3 days. Hanet knew that if he didn't agree, both of them would die here today. He gritted his teeth and squeezed out a few words. I will come back to you in 3 days. Before he finished speaking, the figure in the room disappeared in an instant. The pressure just now seemed to be just a dream and disappeared in an instant. Puff. Hanet suddenly sat down on the ground, his underwear completely soaked. The whole person seemed to be fished out of the water. Xian and the others will be here in 3 days. They will definitely be able to contain that guy a little by then. The more he thought about it, the more terrifying he felt. That weird sense of oppression was clearly something that only the bloody figure had ever experienced. Garen actually realized this already in Type 4. This discovery made him feel a deep shiver from the bottom of his heart. He had never chosen to rely on the strength of his companions. For the first time, he strongly hoped that Baker Stone Eye would arrive soon. As a genius of the Earth Flower Society, Xian's talent is the most terrifying evolutionary acceleration, and he can definitely resist the oppression of the opponent. In a remote corner outside the house, Galen lay lazily on his back under the shade of a big tree, using his hands as pillows and folding them behind his head. The afternoon sun shone thinly on his body, bringing a soft but not burning warmth. The breeze blows in the face, carrying the faint fragrance of wildflowers, and small butterflies and bees fly by from time to time. Looking up through the gaps in the leaves, you can see the blue sky, like the finest blue jade. How long has it been since you felt this comfortable? Garen thought in his mind. He couldn't remember how long he had been so relaxed. These 3 days will be his rare rest time. Except for the 3 hours of Fusion Dragon Head every day, the rest of the time will be completely free. It's just a good time to completely relax your body and mind and adjust your state for the next battle. Hanet ran away quietly last time, which made him feel unhappy. This time, he was given a severe blow. Suppression of spirit and suppression of totem are completely different concepts. Putting aside the difference in quality, chi suppression is the simultaneous oppression of a person's body and mind. A high-level chi suppresses a low-level chi, and it is entirely possible to completely defeat the opponent's martial arts heart. After all, the fusion of spirit and spirit includes will, which is the integration of spirit, energy, and spirit. And the effect of courage on an ordinary person without courage is even more obvious. Just like the tiger suppressing the rabbit, this is the oppression of the natural instinct and subconsciousness. Just seeing it will make the whole body tremble and fall into fear. Not to mention resisting. The human body's instinctive response to crisis is often beneficial, but when it comes to courage, it actually has a harmful effect. It will stiffen the body of the creature, making it unable to move. The whole body will be in a state of extreme tension and alert, so that the consumption is too huge, and there is no need for the other party to take action. It can scare people to death just by scaring them. Even heroes who can support it will also losing strength due to the huge consumption of the body's instincts. This is the terror of Qi, a dangerous technique created by relying on biological instinct. After the fusion of energy, blood, and totem light was initially generated in Garen's body, his energy was suddenly able to be used again, and the degree of use was much more powerful than in his heyday. This kind of courage can actually ignore the totem's light defense and directly affect the human body. This made Garen feel slightly happy. Although he had expected it, he still felt happy when he actually got such a beneficial change. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 491. The change in spirit stems from the emergence of new power in his body. This is Galleon's biggest gain. In the past, without breaking the totem light, the seemingly powerful bloody aura could not directly affect the totem master. Instead, it could only use the accompanying corrosive toxicity to corrode the opponent's totem light, which was considered a large-scale attack. AoE damage. But now it has restored its original role. In addition to the spirit, the other is the origin of the evil god. The origin of the evil god is the resource treasure that the leader of Black Sky Society relies on to break through to the peak of Type 5, and its effect is definitely extraordinary. But if you want to use the origin of the evil god, you must first remove the will of the evil god king from it. To do this, you must first use Hanet's purification ability to pull out the will of the evil god king, and then defeat it and dissipate it with external forces. Only then can you truly use it. Origin. Lying under the shade of the tree, Garen became more and more relaxed, almost falling into a dream. Time passes slowly. In the afternoon, Garen woke up from his sleep. After practicing the black water true skill for a while, he sat cross-legged on the grass and played with the communication ring. He has 3 communication rings, which are to contact Sakura, Kurosawa Palace, and the secret agency. The ring of the secret agency is of no use anymore. The director and others have all moved away and are now estimated to have settled on the edge of the world's rift. It is a remote area between Khawatan and the Arctic Circle. There is a majestic city there, which is the fortress of underground monsters. Most of the Khawatans who had fled earlier went there, trying to go underground from there and gain protection from the Council of Elders. Although a small number of them came back later, most of them had already entered the mountain city and probably would not come out again. The situation in the imperial capital does not allow them to come back. Take off the ring from the secret mechanism and crush it directly, then take the ring given by Sigula. After turning it gently, there was a faint rustling sound on the ring. After some research, Garen discovered that the principle of this ring was similar to that of a radio, except that it could independently share an encrypted channel for communication. It's just that no one is connected at this time. After turning off the ring, Garen thought for a while and turned the ring on the side of Kurosawa Palace. Not long after this time, there was a snapping sound from the other side. Is something wrong? It was Ephesis's voice, which had a slight change of tone through the signal. But still the same indifference. How are you now? How are you doing? Now that he had contacted Effie, Garen also asked casually. Very good. If you give me another half year, I should be able to get through the fusion period and enter the 5th type. Ephesus replied calmly, you are also in the fusion period. Why are you running out in such a hurry? Of course I have my own plans. How is the situation in the palace? Garen continued to ask. Fortunately, it's just that Blizzard and the goddess fought and caught fire, destroying half of the outer palace area. It's being repaired now. Blizzard and Tianu, Garen had a headache. Aren't they two together? Why did they start fighting? According to the rules you set, the elders also have the right to choose a disciple in the palace as his personal successor. The two of them also took a fancy to a newly recruited kid. If they couldn't compete, they started fighting. Effie Sith was also a little helpless. Oh? A little guy? He has such a high talent that he can let two top type 4 people do it for him. Garen was quite surprised. He is a child of commoner origin, only 15 years old, but he practiced the basic Blackwater true skill and actually broke through the first level and entered the second level in just 3 days. Ephesus replied calmly. Oh, so powerful, Garen was immediately interested. He created the Blackwater true skill. Naturally, he is also the one who knows the difficulty of this secret martial art best. If you want to enter the second level, no matter how terrifying the talent is, it is unlikely to be so fast. There must be some huge secret in this child. When he recruited people from all over the world, regardless of their origins, he only looked at their qualifications, and he used the name educated without discrimination to identify many talented children among the common people. What these children lack is not talent, but just a rope to climb up. What's so special about him? Ephesus was silent for a while. I'm not sure, but this kid has terrifying qualifications, a firm mind, and a strong spirit. Very strong spirit. Garen became even more interested. If the arrogant and far-sighted Rose Sword Master Ephesus could praise a person with strong spirit, then that would be something special. Tell me, what did he do that made you feel very powerful? There was a slight silence over there. He didn't answer immediately, but spoke slowly after a while. On the first day he entered the palace, he fully exceeded twice the amount of training required by geniuses of his generation. Oh, Garen curled his lips. This genius training camp is a place where geniuses are specially selected from future students for unified training. He is also the most powerful competitor and pursuer for the positions of core students and generals. On the second day, I broke through the first level, and my body index increased twice as much as my peers. Only 3 people can compare with him. And Ephesus also had a smile in his words at this time. And after that, he went to sit in front of your statue every day. Sit quietly. Garen became even more interested. He knew that as the first palace master of Kurosawa Palace, he had a portrait made. I was curious at the time. When I passed by, I went over and asked him why he came here to meditate. What do you think he answered? There was also a hint of appreciation in Ephesus' tone. How did he say? He said that Palace Master Kurosawa ends the common people was the first person to create the world, and he will be the second person to control the world. He admires you, but he only admires you. Arrogant, Garen couldn't help laughing. Just admiration, not awe. It means that he will eventually surpass the other party. Sitting quietly in front of your own sculpture not only means respecting it, but also means aiming for it. How is the situation now? How long has he been in the palace? Garen asked again. If the evil god's origin didn't need to be purified, he couldn't help but want to go back and see this arrogant little guy. He has been in the palace for half a month and has now entered the 3rd level of the Blackwater. Sis. Garen then really took a breath of air. When he left, he had already passed on all the first 4 levels of the technique to Ephesus. The first 4 levels of this secret martial art were the most critical part. From a mortal to a transcendent level, it was mainly this foundation. The 3 Grand Master disciples he valued most had only reached the 2nd floor at this time. And this little guy has only started for half a month, and he has already reached the 3rd level. How consistent does this physique need to be with Blackwater's true skill to achieve such terrifying progress? Garen suddenly realized that he might have underestimated the people of the world. The terror of genius contained among the common people of this world had never had a chance to explode before. Now there is an opportunity. This power that has been suppressed by the totem nobles for countless years instantly breaks through all obstacles and pierces the sky. Garen put his hands down and dropped them to his knees. He suddenly felt something. The establishment of Kurosawa Palace is creating a new history. The voice of Ephesus still kept coming. After you left, according to your arrangement, the palace received several batches of apprentice students who came from all over the country, and selected 3 batches of 24 students. The elders discussed it and arranged all the students according to the 9 heads. The dragon level is divided into 9 levels. From 1 dragon to 9 dragons. The more dragon heads, the stronger. The Blackwater true skill can develop potential. Now that little guy is the first to enter the 3rd level, he actually has the potential to develop a totem. There were signs of strength. So the 2 elders started fighting over this guy. According to the agreement, the elders are actually qualified to accept disciples in the palace as disciples, but they are just teachers on the road of totem, not secret martial arts. Now that little guy hasn't fully awakened the power of the totem, and he's been robbed like this. Obviously, the talent detected is not ordinary. Although Garen is now almost standing at the top of the continent, hearing this news, there is also a feeling that the times have changed. The human population is depleted, and totem masters have suffered heavy losses, but geniuses are emerging in large numbers. Is it a return to the past, or is it true that the yin and yang are born? No one knows this question. I will come back as soon as possible, Garen finally confessed, then closed the ring and fell into deep thought. There are always ups and downs in the world, and there will be no shortage of the most dazzling figures in any turbulent era. Who knows that little guy will not be the next Ghost Gate? Amazing talent and beauty, unparalleled in the world. The Blackwater true skill, which is measured in years at least, was actually broken through to the 3rd level by him in half a month. This talent. Even when I first practiced the giant elephant secret martial arts, I couldn't do it so quickly. When I think about the world's heroes and overlords gathering together to compete for world supremacy on this world stage. Unknowingly, a surge of heroic spirit surged out of his chest. Standing up slowly, the blood that had gradually cooled down over the years was faintly stirring. Blackwater's true power kept beating in his heart, running faster and faster. The previous fear of the evil God King was completely forgotten at this time. The mind is not respected by strength. Of all things in the world, the only thing that can restrain human power is the human heart. As long as the heart is not restrained, Garen seemed to understand something vaguely. The disciples' behavior shocked him greatly. Not being afraid to stop because of your current weakness, and taking the highest point that your eyes can see as your goal, this is a huge ambition. As long as this kind of heroic spirit does not die prematurely, coupled with such talent, he will definitely be another amazingly talented person in the future. Since the world of secret martial arts reached its peak, the King of Century realm, there seems to have been a slight change. Garen closed his eyes and savored the subtle feeling, as if it was fleeting and elusive. In fact, he has experienced this time travel, grown up from a weakling again, walked step by step to the present, and has seen so much history. It has already reached the edge of breakthrough. In a daze, he seemed to see the Eagle King Goth in the distance, who was entangled in a black net, the Flower King Anis who was bound by a red thread, and the Dragon King Alexander who was trapped in an ice prison. And himself. He looked down at himself. His body was stained with something like black volcanic ash. It is hesitation, fear, frustration, and fear. Unknowingly, Garen's mind became clearer and clearer, and all the worries and fears that had always been caused by the fear of the Ghost Gate were swept away. The black dust on his body gradually fell off in large quantities, and the originally clean and tidy clothes underneath were soon revealed. Suddenly, he looked up to the sky and laughed. I didn't expect that it was a little guy who gave me a warning. At this moment, the level of the King of Century actually increased slightly again, reaching an unpredictable and unknown level. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 492. The black water power inside Garen's body was running wildly. In the dark space, The nine-headed dragon looked up to the sky and roared. The tyrannical energy in his body was like plasma, constantly flying around and rolling like boiling magma. At this moment, Garen's mind seemed to be completely integrated with the ancient nine-headed dragon's soul, and they were indistinguishable from each other. The nine-headed dragon in the darkness roared with joy, and actually actively cooperated with the black water true skill for the first time, accelerating the fusion. The sixth dragon head quickly merged into Garen's body, and the strong dragon heart stirred up a large amount of blood to nourish the fused flesh and bones. Nine-headed dragon had no intention of resisting at all, as if Garen was his relative at this time. An aura of surrender and reverence emanated from nine-headed dragon. It seemed as if Garen at this time was the real swamp overlord in ancient times. With the active cooperation of the nine-headed dragon, the fusion is getting faster and faster, without the need for galleons at all. The core of the nine-headed dragon is like a fanatical religious worshipper, actively decomposing its own flesh and blood, and merging into the cycle of the black water true skill. With the fusion the power was digested over and over again and quickly transformed into Garen's own strength. Garen stood quietly under the shade of the tree, feeling calm in his heart, but there was a hint of overbearing and domineering spirit lingering in his heart. He understood that this was the overlord's will contained in the bloodline genes of the ancient nine-headed dragon. It was precisely because he truly matched this trace of will that the core totem nine-headed dragon bowed his head and surrendered, completely willing to integrate himself into his body. In ancient times, even the birds in the sky would be shaken down by the roar of the swamp overlord. This tyrannical and fearless will swept everything, and was the pride of one of the strongest creatures in ancient times. The incomplete core totem is just a false nine-headed dragon after all. Facing the true will of our ancestors, we can only choose to surrender. The villagers in the distant village seemed to have heard the noise here, and there were already footsteps coming towards this direction. Garen smiled slightly and turned into a streak of black smoke, disappearing into the woods at the edge. Now that he has the active cooperation of the nine-headed dragon, fusing the dragon head is no longer a big problem, and the time it takes is greatly shortened. It is estimated that it will take less than 2 days to completely fuse the nine-headed dragon and enter the fifth type. After all, the fusion and transformation of Blackwater's true power also takes time and cannot be accomplished overnight. And that trace of the ancient nine-headed dragon overlord's will unexpectedly matched his, and actually had the intention of merging into his spirit. But these are not problems. The key is that he finally sees the peak level of Type 5. Pharaohs, the evil god king, these two people have reached the peak of Type 5, and their accumulation over the years is extremely rich. But Garen could feel that Pharaoh's aura seemed to be stronger than that of the evil god king. The will and spirit of this most powerful Zenian king in history has already reached the level that Garen has just entered. The evil god king, on the other hand, could barely compete with Pharaohs just by relying on countless years of accumulation of strength. Garen didn't know how to describe this level. If we use the vocabulary of the earth, it means to understand one's mind and see one's nature, to discover one's deepest nature, to have a clear and crystal clear mind, and not to be burdened by external things. In this state, one can always exert one's greatest strength without letting any external objects affect one's state. Even with the mobilization of will, unprecedented strength may explode. Will not be threatened or dragged down. Fight or retreat without any delay. At this level, the inner mind is like a bright pearl, which can be divided into several layers. Nothing on the outer layer can affect the inner layer. I didn't expect that there are people in this world who can surpass the realm of the king of the century. Garen sighed in his heart. Pharaoh's is already so powerful, so what about the more powerful Ghost Gate? He suddenly felt lucky that he came to this great era and could compete head-on with the strongest in this era for everything he wanted. 3 days later. In the dim light of the cabin, Hannet was lying on the ground little by little, finishing the final lines of the spell formation. On the ground of the hut, an extremely complex circular magic array was clearly revealed in front of another person in the house. This spell array seems to be formed by overlapping more than 10 spell arrays. It is only 4 meters in diameter, but the number of symbols contained in it actually reaches thousands, and they are densely packed like countless small white insects crawling together. The candle light flickered, shining on Hanet's slightly sweaty forehead, reflecting a trace of oil stains. "It's finally done." Hanet slowly finished carving the last knife and got up from the ground. "As long as I wait until the thunderstorm, connect the electromagnetic field in the sky, and cooperate with my physique, I can purify the source and draw out the will of the evil God King inside. What happens after we are involved? None of us can stop the will of the evil God King. Even just a thought is enough to defeat all of us," the middle-aged man next to him said in a low voice. "It's up to that person at that time." Hanet shook his head. "We are only responsible for drawing out the will of the evil God King, and the rest is none of our business." "Then go and notify that person now," the middle-aged man asked. Hannity nodded and sat down on the ground, looking haggard and exhausted. His eyes were bloodshot, obviously due to a serious lack of rest. The middle-aged man stood up and came to help him up. "Too bad I can't help." "It's okay. Are Shiyan and the others here?" Hanet closed his eyes and rubbed his temples. "I stepped up to notify them. I should be able to barely make it today." "That's good. Now that everything is ready, can we get started?" Suddenly there was a voice in the room. Their hearts skipped a beat. Although they were mentally prepared, they were still startled by the sudden sound that appeared next to them. "Palace Master Garen, are you sure you want to start now?" Hanet quickly calmed down and spoke out. "Of course. How are you preparing for the origin of the evil god?" Garen was still dressed as he was 2 days ago, wearing grey linen clothes, smiling, and looking very gentle. "The preparations have been completed." Hanet lowered his head, not looking into the other party's unfathomable red eyes. It had only been a few days since they had seen each other, and the aura on the other person's body had become much stronger. "Then let's get started." Garen nodded. Hearing this, Hanet walked into the spell formation, placed the bottle of light god and evil god's origin in the center of the formation, sat cross-legged in the formation, touched the ground with his palms, and pressed them on the only 2 empty spaces in the formation. Buzz! A burst of blue fluorescence emanated from the entire magic array, and all the lines within the array glowed blue. A trace of electricity flowed out of Hanet's body and injected into the array below. The evil god's origin was placed in the center. At this moment, there was a click, and a crack suddenly opened in the crystal ball. The white mucus origin inside slowly flowed out, emitting white fluorescence. Blue light and white light mix together, and the blue slowly rotates around the white. As time passed, with the white light as the center, the blue halo arc gradually formed a vortex with a diameter of 2 meters. Click! Suddenly a bolt of lightning flashed across the whirlpool, and the lightning flashed. In the center of the vortex, a bird-shaped shadow with a dark blue head and entire body actually rose. The blue bird is shaped like a peacock, with 9 long electric tail feathers trailing from its tail. The tail feathers and the blue light are mixed together, making it indistinguishable. Click! Another moving lightning flashed across the formation, and the shadow of a creature with a human face and a bird's body rose again within the formation. The human-faced bird is covered in blue, with no expression on its face, facing the 9-tailed bird from a distance. The 9-tailed bird and the human-faced bird just sandwich the origin of the white evil god. 2 phantoms no bigger than a palm floated in the blue and white light, faintly stimulating the arcs in the blue light to become more and more dense. The white liquid in the center also showed signs of becoming clear. The buzzing sound became louder and louder, and the whole house seemed to start to shake. Successful, Hanet's face showed a hint of joy. When the origin begins to become clear, it is a sign that the purification has begun to be successful, he said loudly. A smile appeared on Garen's lips as he stood outside the formation. Suddenly, there was a faint sound of hurried footsteps outside the house. The footsteps were getting closer and closer, becoming more and more urgent. Bang! The door of the house was violently knocked open, and a tall young man with silver eyes rushed in. "Wait a minute, Stone Eyes," the girl's urgent cry came from behind him. Hannah and the two felt happy, as if a heavy burden had been lifted off their bodies, and they felt much more relaxed. With the fourth type of Baker's Stone Eyes, the genius of the Earth Flower Club can definitely make the master of Kurosawa Palace a little afraid. Being able to enter the fourth type before the age of 30, and with the powerful Jiwa Club behind him, no matter how arrogant and domineering Kurosawa Palace is, he will not make enemies at will. Ignore the behemoth of Daiwashi. He and Shiyan met at the totem exchange meeting. At that time, he, Tina, Shiyan and another companion stood up to testify at the same time because of a group of bullying totem masters, and they got to know each other. Stand up. Later, they discovered that each other's totem abilities were somewhat compatible, and they could form a team. So a few people teamed up to complete many tasks of the Silver Lantern Master Guild, and also formed a small mercenary group. Later, in times of shared adversity, the friendship became deeper and deeper. They sacrificed their lives to save each other many times, which can be regarded as a lifelong friendship. This time Hannah heard that Shiyan was coming. Although he said he didn't want to rely on any external force, in fact he felt warm in his heart. Now Baker Stone Eyes is no longer the ordinary person he was before, but a big shot who represents the Earth Flower Society in every word and deed. He is the new generation's closest genius to the three heroes level. In fact, if the greatest reputation of the three heroes was not for establishing the three major domains, with their own natural huge power to protect a large number of civilian nobles, and truly fighting for their personal strength, Hannah believed that they might not be as powerful as Stone Eyes. Just when the two looked up at Shiyan and Tina, they found that the expressions on the faces of Shiyan and Tina were extremely strange. "Gajalan," Shiyan said in a low voice, slowly calling out the name of the person in front of him. The smiles that had not yet appeared on the faces of Hannah and Hanat gradually turned gloomy in the deep voice of Shiyan. They clearly saw that Baker's stone-eyed face began to turn pale, and his eyes looked extremely nervous. Including Tina behind them, the two of them seemed to be afraid. Hanat's heart sank suddenly. "My teacher, are you okay?" Garen looked back at the two of them and asked with a smile. "Mr. Aining is doing well." Baker Stone Eyes bowed slightly and stood up. A trace of golden totem light was flowing around him at high speed, and the huge 4-type aura could burst out at any time. He has not forgotten the previous two near-humiliating results. The man in front of him has completely become his nightmare. He has been trying his best to improve himself, but every time he recalls the tragic defeat, his heart feels cold. The white light in the room became brighter and brighter, and a strange and inexplicable aura slowly flowed out from the white source. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 493. Purifying the source on a non-thunderstorm day is inherently insufficient, but when the evil God King takes the initiative, it is a different matter. Under the interweaving white light and blue light, Garen showed no signs of taking action. Instead, he just stood there and turned back to look at the source at the center of the spell array. Baker, Stone Eyes, and the others paid close attention to Garen with high vigilance, and did not dare to get too close to him. Instead, they walked close to the wall and walked to Hanat's side. The room was eerily silent, with only the clicking sound of blue arcs coming from time to time. The blue light shone on Garen's face, seeming to reflect a hint of eerie coldness. The strange aura in the origin of the evil god is getting stronger and stronger, and traces of white airflow slowly flowed out, but they seem to have no entity, looming. Wow! Garen's hand suddenly shook, and all the remaining evil god origins were thrown out, accurately falling into the center of the spell array. Click! A thunder suddenly flashed across the sky outside the house. People in the whole village raised their heads in confusion. The originally clear sky was suddenly gathering large clouds. "What is that?" someone shouted. The villagers were all stunned and dropped the things they were holding. Everyone who was still in the house ran out, some even holding their children. Everyone looked up at the sky blankly. The originally cloudless sky was now gathering more and more clouds. "No. That's not cloud gas," the village chief muttered, leaning on his cane and raising his head. The large white clouds in the sky, at this moment, instantly turned into patches of blood red, like being infected by red ink. Inside the house, a fanatical smile appeared on Garen's face. He raised one hand and looked at the sky to grab it. The entire roof was corroded and melted silently, as if candles were melting and ice and snow were melting. Within seconds, a huge round hole opened up. Laugh. In the center of the spell formation, a blood-red light pillar suddenly rose into the sky. The piercing screams continued. The entire hut completely disintegrated in an instant, and the surrounding walls melted and disappeared silently like a roof. Hannett and others had no choice but to flee from the house one after another. Baker's stone eyes protected everyone and held up a hemisphere of golden totem light. Everyone looked at the beam of light in the distance in shock. The blood-colored light pillar broke through the blood clouds in the sky, and countless air currents and clouds revolved around it at high speed. Garen stood in front of the light pillar, looking up at the sky, as if the huge screams and vibrations were completely unaware of him. In the sky, countless blood clouds quickly gathered and condensed, forming the shape of a huge human face. The blood-colored face looked like a thin mask. On the left side of the pupil, stood a silver-faced man in blood-robed robes. The man in blood robe was high up, looking down, and his eyes met Garen's gaze upwards. The wind was howling, the blood clouds were rolling, the entire sky was dark, and the sunlight was completely covered by countless blood clouds. Only the huge bloody face and the silver-faced man in red robe standing with the left pupil were left. "You shouldn't have led me out." The evil god king's voice sounded like a man or a woman, and it was impossible to tell the gender. "Fight with me." Garen licked his lips, with a hint of excitement in his eyes. "I tried my best to use the will in the source as a guide to draw out your true body, not just to chat with you here." The two eyes under the evil god king's mask seemed to glow red, and he glanced at Garen lightly. "You are no match for me. Enough strong men have died in my hands." Before he finished speaking, he raised his hand and pressed it down. A red beam of light suddenly fell from the sky, like thunder. Boom! The beam of light fell, pressing hard towards Garen's position. Bang! Garen raised his hand to block it, and countless red rays of light passed through his sides like water. His whole body was pressed hard, almost pressed into the earth, and the light of the black totem around him was compressed and deformed. "It's really vulnerable." The evil god king's contemptuous voice came from the sky. Suddenly the red light in his eyes dimmed slightly. "Huh? I'll let you go this time. Next time, you won't be so lucky." Before he finished speaking, the human faces in the sky suddenly dispersed, turning into countless red clouds and disappearing at once, along with the evil god king himself. The huge red light slowly dissipated after a few seconds. Garen's whole body was completely pressed into the ground for most of his body. Even the light of the totem could not completely offset the terrifying suppression of this blow. The huge beam of light directly suppressed him and rendered him speechless. The red light completely dissipated. Garen stood there with an angry face. The evil god king's explosive power was beyond his imagination, but it did not mean that he was unable to resist. It was just that he did not get used to it for a while. Just when he was about to fight back, he didn't expect the evil god. The king actually ran away. The explosive power of the evil god king's secret martial arts far exceeds that of Blackwater's real skill, and its power is terrifying and abnormal, but it is not as highly condensed as Blackwater's, but it far exceeds it in terms of strength. But when it happened, he was knocked speechless by a casual blow from the evil god king, which seriously challenged the ancient nine-headed dragon's self-esteem. There was silence all around, and no one dared to speak out, for fear of irritating Garin and taking his anger out on himself. The villagers, led by the knowledgeable village chief, had already exited the village and looked far away in the surrounding woods. Hannity, Baker, Stone Eyes, and others were protected by a hemispherical golden light shield, and they looked at this side with some fear. The 5-type power confrontation, even the aftermath, left the golden shield of Baker's Stone Eye covered with dense cracks. As long as the strength is increased a little more, it will be completely broken. Garin suppressed the anger in his heart and looked at Xian and others from a distance. He raised his hand suddenly. Roar! A black dragon's poisonous mist rushed over and hit the golden shield. After smashing the light shield with a click, it hit Baker's Stone Eye hard. Bang! As if someone had punched them in the face, Baker, Xian, and the others were knocked away and flew up and hit the wall behind them. What are you doing? Tina was not harmed much, and most of the power was blocked by the Stone Eye. Are you going to vent your anger on us if you can't defeat the evil God King? It turns out that you, Palace Master Kurosawa, are such a villain. I used to think you were a powerful top master. I guess I was wrong about you. She got up directly, screaming. Stop talking about Tina. Xian held Tina down, and stood in front of her with blood flowing from his mouth. Hanat also got up with a pale complexion and helped up his uncle whose head was covered with blood, with uncontrollable anger on his face. Garin had a strange look of shame on his face, and the ferocious anger on his face suddenly disappeared without a trace, as if his face had changed, and his face quickly calmed down. I'm sorry, I was impulsive. Hanat led the evil God King to me and helped me so much, but I actually hurt you. It's my fault. There was no pretense on his expression at this time. Tina had a hunch that her intuition was strong and she could easily tell whether the other party was being hypocritical. But at this moment, she actually felt that Garin was really sincerely apologizing. This time, it's my fault. I should have killed you today, Baker Stone Eyes, but it's a pity. Garin sighed with regret, and his figure suddenly turned into a black cloud and disappeared from the place. The surroundings were quiet, there was no other sound, only the wind whistling past the village. Behind Baker Stone Eyes is a wooden house. The two men and women in white looked at each other and smiled, and the shining green seeds in their hands slowly dimmed at the same time. He noticed us, the man said calmly. So what? With the seed of instant light, we can take away the Stone Eye with just a thought. Even if he takes action, he won't get any better, the woman said with a smile. Thank you for your hard work this time. Why are we still talking about this? The man shook his head. Sisley, what are you going to do next? Time is running out. The 9-headed demon dragon should have entered the separation stage, which is a bit tricky. This level is the same as Pharaoh's, which is very troublesome. Integrate the blood will of the totem into itself to achieve complete soul fusion. It is not just people who affect the totem. And the totem will also affect people in turn. But he can use the totem state separately and independently. Fight with the power of the most perfect totem fusion. In terms of actual strength, there are few people who can surpass him. This guy is so young, he actually entered this level, the man sighed. Don't worry about him. He will be one of our biggest helpers when he comes out of the Ghost Gate. Let's think about how to deal with the school dispute. I have contacted the Lord of the Three Realms. I can't get through this time, maybe. The woman whispered, but her hand was held tightly by the man, and a warm force passed from the man's palm. Don't worry, I will always be with you. The woman raised her face, revealing a delicate and gentle young face. She gently leaned her body into the man's arms. The two people turned around and suddenly turned into green light, exploded, faded and dissipated. Garen's figure moved at high speed in the sea of trees, like an ink line between the dark green carpet, extremely clear. The blazing sunlight shone down, leaving no trace of his shadow. He didn't know how long he had been running, but he suddenly stopped. He closed his eyes and sensed movement in the distance. The large-scale gathering point of the evil god cult was not far ahead. After being tricked by the evil god king, the ancient nine-headed dragon's will was suffocated. Garen decided to simply go directly to the evil gods who were easiest to find in the evil god cult. After all, in a head-on confrontation, the evil god king and the 18 evil gods join forces. Not to mention him, even the stronger pharaohs is unlikely to be able to deal with it head-on. Immortality is the most terrifying thing about the evil god, and even grinding it down can kill most powerful people. I sensed the aura and sound of the evil god cult's stronghold from afar. Garen lightly jumped onto a big tree branch and slowly squatted down. "It's getting more and more lively," he murmured, looking at the red barrel-like stronghold of the evil god cult in the distance. Just when he was about to attack Baker Stone Eyes, he suddenly felt an inexplicable teleportation force surrounding Baker Stone Eyes and others. This power is looming and difficult to detect. Moreover, there are two extremely harmonious and tyrannical auras lingering nearby. The intense vitality contained in the aura made him immediately think of Daiwa society. That is the aura that only plant totems have. The Daiwa club has always been extremely low-key, but Garen is familiar with history and has not forgotten at all that after the birth of the Ghost Gate, Sisley, the president of the Daiwa club, and the top master in the entire East continent who can fight against the Ghost Gate will also be born. The shocking battle between the two has a strong record even in the history of the planet. The elders have always been in charge of the Daiwa club, and the president has disappeared without a trace. But the Ghost Gate was born, forcing them to appear in order to prevent the Daiwa society from being completely destroyed. Sisley is actually a woman, and her strength also includes her husband. In other words, the actual strongest person in the Daiwa club is actually the couple, two people working together. The core totem of the two of them is a plant totem called the double love flower. This plant itself is a pair for life and is connected to each other, just like a lover and a couple are dependent on each other for life and death. The two of them worked together and were able to fight against the Ghost Gate. Of course, there were other reasons, but they still managed to hold the Ghost Gate back for a while. Garen compiled the original history. He was already aware of the upcoming situation. After he was promoted, the core totem changed into a special state. It was a state dominated by the will of the ancestors of the nine-headed dragon bloodline, which could unleash the strongest combat power. Blackwater's true power is firmly on the 13th level. This is done by rushing forward one by one. Garen recorded the changes in the operation route of each floor for the students of Kurosawa Palace to learn and control. Although the nine-headed dragon bloodline that does not match it will never be stronger than Garen, if you reach this peak, you will at least have strength that far exceeds the average 4 types. If you are lucky and find a core totem that is extremely suitable for Blackwater's true skill, you might even have a chance to enter the 5th type.